welcome to my talk. I think it will be quite bipolar because of the previous talk done by my fellow colleague, because I will talk about completely opposite thing. I will talk directly about games that are about killing and beating other people. And I think nothing signalizes that more than when I first started as a game designer and I had my first interview. I was asked, what kind of games do you play? And I said the ones in which I can humiliate the other player. So that's quite far away from the previous talk. I hope you will not murder me about that.
Oh, yeah.
So let's go just through a short introduction. My name is Marek-Martin Matyska. I'm from Prague. I work at Geewa, currently as a head of game design. We are a Prague-based studio that makes PvP mobile games. We are around 70 people. Our most famous recent game is Smashing 4. If you didn't play it, play it. It's a lot of fun. And we have a big female audience. But before all of that started, at the age of 6, I became competitive chess player around 2000 ELO. I found chess as a way to promote my love of games. However, there was something else that happened when I was young, and it was the golden age of computer games. Things like Quake 3, Warcraft 3, Starcraft, Counter-Strike were all coming out. So sadly, I've ended my chess career and switched it to play computer games all the time. I've played Dota, Counter-Strike, Starcraft, and I found something really important about competitive games for my life, and not just for my life, because I was a really fat kid. And if you are a fat kid in school, you know it's not fun to grow up in physical education classes and always be picked last. And especially for us males, it's important that we compete for proper psychological development. And computer games were my escape, where it didn't matter that I had 100 kilograms when I was 12 and I couldn't kick a ball in football, because I could beat all my schoolmates in Counter-Strike. How cool is that? For the record, no one thought that was cool back then. So I spent most of the first 20 years of my life playing computer games. I looked way differently. However, even though I did not seem healthy, I was really happy back then, because I had one and one only purpose in my life, and to wake up, open my computer, pick a game that I loved, and beat other players. And I was really good at that, and it made me filled with joy. However, this last photo is really important because it's from Sweden and from DreamHack in 2010. That was when I ended my career after not qualifying for the main event in Starcraft 2. And I realized I need to do something else with my life, because playing games is no longer an option. Luckily, I had a friend that had a video game studio, and he hired me as a junior game designer. But enough for me, enough about the company I work for. Let's dive directly into competitive games. When I speak competitive games, these are the games that I think of. For purpose, I've put most of the old games. I want to go a little bit into the history where we all began, because in recent times, people sometimes mistake competitive games for games that are played for money. And just because developers are throwing a lot of money on certain games, that doesn't make it competitive. The core design principles make it competitive. We've been competing in games for cans of beer. We didn't need hundreds of thousands of dollars. We did it for the fun and for the sport. And I think this is really important that we do not forget this, because I always thought about video game competition as MMA, and in recent years we kind of turned into wrestling. While there is nothing wrong about watching wrestling, it's all fake. So what does it make to make a game competitive? Well, one of the most important things is that it must have high skill ceiling. What does it mean? The game can be really simple, but the players have to be able to get really good at least one of the things. It can be just jumping over the bridge. If the jump over the bridge is really hard and you have to do it 100 times per second, well, that's it. Usually you can define it by speed, strategy, or knowledge. If you think about card games, it doesn't have to be even video game, it can be something like poker. You have a lot of knowledge, you have a lot of strategy, but there is no speed in card games. However, if you think something like Quake or Counter-Strike, there is speed, strategy, and knowledge. There can even be teamwork. Surprisingly, there are and even nowadays, there are more games that are popular as team-based games rather than 1v1 game. Although when we started back in 2000, there were no team games played. Everything was just about 1 versus 1. But hopefully, this is something to stay. And timing. This is something that's not really present that much anymore. But if we look back, especially for racing games, they were all about timing and precision. I would like to talk about some of the games that are really deep in my heart. This is Trackmania Nations. It's literally one of the simplest controllable games. You control it with just 5 buttons. It's been played by tens of millions of players, and it's really simple and really fun. You just drive your racing car, cross a lot of obstacles, and have fun. However, the skill cap in this game is absolutely insane. One of my great friends was the double master of Europe in this game, and basically this is how the game looks if you play it for 20,000 hours. Trust me, this is not how it would look if I would play it. And although I found this really impressive, I could still watch this even though I never played that much of this game. And this is something I want for all of you to think of when you would want to design a hard competitive game. It's not about complexity. The game can be controlled super easily, but by doing a lot of different twists, literally, you can make it competitive. So let's go into detail. Super simple controls, anyone can play. If I would plug this game here on a laptop, anyone in the audience could play it within 3 minutes and have fun. However, to master it to the level of the GIF that I showed you, it would take you years. To master this game, you need excellent timing and precision. As I said, it's 5 buttons. This is not about clicking the keyboard as quickly as possible. It's clicking the right buttons at the right time, or using joystick, which is much easier for the record. However, this game, which was played for tens of thousands of euros for multiple years, had one big problem. The players were simply too good. They played the game 10 hours a day, one single map, and they learned every single turn, every single detail. So one thing that the developer did, they made constant map changes, and basically they've added a different parameter that was not part of the initial game design, adaptation. Before each event, they released the maps just a week prior to the event, and the players had to adapt and learn quickly, or play 18 hours a day and drink a lot of Red Bull. It's not random that Red Bull was the biggest sponsor of Trackmania Nations. Another game that I've spent more time than I would like to is Starcraft Brood War. This is a game that made all esport possible. This was a game that was so big in 2000 that gaming in Europe is still not as big as it was that big in Korea 20 years ago. And although it is a really hardcore game, it looks quite peaceful unless you look at it from the eyes of Korean pro gamer. Then you kind of think that someone is not doing something legal on that screen. And to understand that, we have to think about what real-time strategies require. Just by the definition of that name, they are real-time and they require strategy. They require micromanagement, that is how well you control your troops. They require macro-management, that means how well you can assess your economy and do everything at once. Knowledge about what you are doing, why are you doing it, and what your opponent is doing. But ultimately, the ultimate factor that allowed this game to succeed, and it's still being played even after 2 decades in Korea for a lot of money, is speed. The developer didn't put any cap on how quickly the players can play, which on one hand, for people like me that are big fans of this game, I'm literally watching this game on the competitive scene for over 20 years. It's, as people are looking forward for Super Bowl, I'm looking forward for the next match of Starcraft. It means that the people are still getting better after 20 years. The game had 2 balance patches in the last 12 years. How amazing is that? If any of you is a developer of PvP games, you will understand that having 2 balance patches in 12 years is something that's your dream and your producer's dream. However, all that speed comes at a cost because majority of the Korean pro gamers actually have to retire and go into retirement because they fuck up their arm. They literally cannot play the game anymore because of enormous pain, and they cannot even work. Just think about it. You play the game for 10 years, make a lot of money, and then you retire because you cannot do anything else. Tell me about sacrifices. So the game was released almost 2 decades ago, 1999. Starcraft Brood War, its expansion was 2001. It's still being played, which is okay. There are a lot of games that are still being played. What is amazing that the players are still getting better. Why? Because they are getting faster. Because we have new training methods, and because there is more money, there is more dedication to sacrifice your life. And this is another factor that the developer didn't actually that much think about it, I think, when they were creating the game. Because like normal player plays this game, it's measured in actions per minute, around 120 actions per minute. That's a good competitive gamer in a casual environment. The Korean players played at 4 times that speed, around 400 to 500 actions per minute. If you multiply 10 years, 10 hours a day, it's like 100 million clicks that those players do in their career. Imagine doing 100 million clicks in one game. Now the 4,500 levels of Candy Crush doesn't seem too that much of a death. Another game that I think is very interesting when we go to about games that are about shooting and killing people and promoting toxicity, I think Quake is right there. I think Quake parted the way because this game is literally about flying on the map and killing other players, and it's a lot of fun. Please, if you didn't play it, try it, Quake Free Arena. But it actually did something else. Usually FPS games that we know now, whether it's Overwatch, Counter-Strike, PUBG that we've mentioned in the previews, they use something that's called recoil. That means when you shoot your gun, your bullets spread around the screen, and that creates some form of randomness and also a skill for the player to work around it. You can learn how to shoot with certain guns. The developers of Quake said, nah, that's not something we're gonna do, and they removed this part of aiming completely. Whatever gun you have, you will always shoot to the middle of the screen. And you think so, well, the game is so much simpler if I don't have to think about that, like why would they do it? Well, they wanted to revolutionize the genre, so they focused on something else, on how do you move around the map. And again, this is how obviously a casual player plays the game. Definitely doesn't fly around shooting his rocket launcher. And this is something very interesting because you can think about FPS game, that's a defined genre. You should run around and shoot people into heads. And then you realize you can just change one thing. You can make the aiming simpler, but you can make the movement that has unlimited amount of skill involved in it. And especially for anyone that wants to come up with a new game, this is the form of idea making that you need to insist in yourself. Because nobody wants to play another Counter-Strike. You need to come up with something else. Maybe skip the running with the knife for running with a pan. Oh wait, Fortnite did it. So, Quake, no recoil. Recoil is the split of the bullets. You always shoot to the middle of the screen. Well, I mean, it was really daunting at the time, and I think if anyone would pitch it to the investors or to the producers board, they would be like, nah, FPS game without recoil, no way. This game, although not being played for money anymore, is still being played a lot, and it parted the way for all FPS games till this day. It's about mastering the movement on the map. This brought a new, unique perspective for the player, something to learn, how you move. It's not just about how you shoot. There are a lot of pick-upable objects on the map, and how the game is played on the highest level is about picking the things and remembering when they respawn. So for the best players, it turns actually into strategy game because you need to think about all the other things. So for us as amateurs, we think about it as someone running on the map and stupidly shooting other people to the head, which is basically what happens. But it's also about remembering all the other stuff. And I think this is, and again, really interesting pickup on why these games were successful, because they brought something new and didn't just copy everybody else, but they still kept one thing at core, that it's really hard to master those things, and they allow people to get really good. Some of the things that we can pick up, and this is a theme that's linked to all the games that I'm talking about. This allows players to get insanely good at the game, and this will be really important at the next slide, where I will speak about games that try to break all of these things. And let's check how did it go for them. This is Heroes of the Storm, which was developed by Blizzard. It was supposed to disrupt the toxic MOBA market of League of Legends and Dota, the games based on illicit, elitistic behavior. And they decided, hey, MOBAs are being played by millions of players, but it's too toxic. Normal people cannot play them for fun. Let's casualize the competitive aspect of MOBAs. That's a great idea, right? Well, the result was that nobody could get insanely good. It was basically socialism in competitive gaming. And when everybody is really good, it means nobody is good. It doesn't matter. There are no legions. And this creative vacuum where players could not really become the stars of their teams, the playmakers, the Super Bowl players. It doesn't matter how you call them. Because competitive games need to allow players to become legends. People then follow these legends. And then if you do not allow this, such as Heroes of the Storm didn't, it results in disconnection from the game. Because we play games, or at least the type of players that play these games, they play to be the best one. Similar as Ash Ketchum in Pokemon, he wanted to be the best Pokemon trainer. We want to be the best Starcraft player. And if everybody can be the best, there is no value. And I don't know if you know it, but the Heroes of the Storm is actually discontinued. It's no longer being developed because suddenly everybody realized there is no reason to play it if you cannot get really good. And it kind of shows us that the competition is really necessary for such games to survive. There's nothing wrong at making games for casual audience, nothing wrong in making mobile games. I make mobile games for my job. But if you decide to make games like this, you cannot do it half-assed. You have to commit and make it about people that can get really good. We go through a brief summary. People will compete just about anything if you give them the chance. This can mean they can compete in Tetris. There is World Masters of Tetris every year. I watch that. That's a lot of fun. And it's also not about money. Good example why it's not about money. There is another developer, Hi-Res, that developed a mobile game called Smite. That mobile game was not doing really well. They were really struggling what to do next with the game, and they decided, let's make tournament for $1 million. That will make everybody play our game. Well, it did. But after the tournament was over, everybody left that game. Because it was not about competing in that game, it was about getting paid for that $1 million. Design your game in a way that players can master at least one game mechanic. As I said, it can be jumping over a bridge, it can be shooting, movement around the map, it can be basically anything. And remember, the games do not need to be complex, they just need to be hard, and it needs to be fun to learn that skill. And games with high skill cap is what made us comparable to real-life sport in the first place. This is a really important part of the slide for me, because when I was young and I was playing these games and I really thought of something about myself, I was really pro gamer, everybody around us was laughing. It's like, that's not a real sport, ha ha ha. Well, now we are being discussed if we will go to the Olympics or not. Nobody is laughing now. But please, and this is really, I will emphasize it once more, let us not become the wrestling of computer games. Let's stay being the MMA. And please, let's all keep making games that allow players to be legends, because that's what brought me here, and I hope that's what will brought a whole new generation of designers, because we need more games like Quake and less games like Fortnite. Thank you.
I should declare my bias. My first ever games event was a thing called Quakeadelica, where we had Thresh, the guy who beat John Carmack at Quake and won his Ferrari, playing against the UK champion. He won 53 to -2. It was the most amazing act of sport I've ever seen on a computer.
Yes, I mean, like, I used to live for those moments, and also now I have a job and cat to feed, which is a really important part of my life. It's still something amazing. Like, there is a tournament, if you know Dota, you know, every year the international is being played for $25 million. And I have a brother that played most of my life with me, and every year we get together, and for a week we just binge watching Dota, like people watch Super Bowl. And you can drink while you watch computer games.
Oh, when you think about that prize money is equivalent to the NBA.
Yes.
That's astounding. And when we were sitting in the Ministry of Sound watching this Quake match in 1998, we had no idea that more than 20 years later we'd be sitting there where you're having $1 billion industry in esports. We have time for a very, very quick question if anyone has one. One here, very quick. We get a microphone. There you
go. Thank you for the talk. As a competitive or ex-competitive player, and as a game designer currently, do you believe, or is your opinion that depth in game mechanics is essential for competitive gameplay, or can you achieve competitive gameplay other ways than depth?
I think you can obviously achieve it without extreme depth. I think it's something that the market is really waiting for really accessible competitive game, something that's easier to jump in and really hard to master. It's this quote we use while we design any mobile game. We say easy to learn, hard to master, but it was not really never applied while we were building computer games or console games. So I think there is definitely a room, and I think there is definitely room for a new racing game on the market. So, and I think racing games are the ones where it's the easiest, because you basically race a car. There's usually a couple of buttons, maybe one for nitro boost, and you can make a really simple game that is about insane amount of skill.
Hill climb racing?
Yes, that's
Amazing game.
That's one of the good examples where how you can achieve the high skill cap without making game as complex as Starcraft.
And just to throw my 2 pennies in, I think what's interesting in that Heroes of the Storm is I would argue that the issue was that they confounded the casualizing of the game with the gameplay, whereas Hill Climb Racing makes a simple, competitive, skill-based game experience that is extremely accessible. And I think that's the difference in terms of if you're going to make your game available to a wider audience, you need to make it accessible. That is not the same as compromising competitive play.
I think the biggest mistake was socialism in skill level.
See, I'm a socialist. I think socialism is a great thing. The issue is not socialism. The issue is dumbing it down and assuming that you can dumb down gameplay and it still be a good game.
Well, let's agree to disagree.
Exactly. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you.